Welcome back to my channel. So is your child using screens and you're worried that it's going to hijack their future? Well, you got to sit through this entire episode. Melanie Hempe, I've known her for a long time now, over 10 years, and she started ScreenStrong, and she has practical steps. And she has recognized this thing before the WHO and psychiatrists and psychologists recognize that screen addiction is real. And she is ahead of the game, and she has a lot of tools for you. So let's look at her bio and you'll see why she is well equipped to share with you expertise for your family and your kids. After her son Adam dropped out of college due to video game addiction, Melanie Hempe used her Emory nursing degree to found ScreenStrong. Her mission is to help families prevent and reverse screen addiction through science-based education and practical tools. Known for simplifying medical concepts, she shares bold solutions nationwide. Melanie hosts the weekly ScreenStrong Families Podcast and has been featured in Psychology Today, The Wall Street Journal, CNN, NPR, and more. Her online courses and 3 books, Will Your Gamer Survive College? Can Your Teen Thrive Without a Smartphone? And the ScreenStrong Solution equip parents and teens for digital wellness. She lives in North Carolina with her husband, Chris, and their 4 children. Adam has since completed college, and their family now enjoys screen-free activities, strong relationships, and a renewed sense of connection. It's never too late. ScreenStrong can help you reclaim your kids. Melanie, welcome.
Thank you, Andy. That was awesome. That sounded great. Thank you.
It sounded great because you are great.
And I don't know, a lot of work, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering.
Yeah.
But you were there in the very beginning with all of it and all of the discovery of everything that was happening with Adam that you just brought up. And then how we did things different for our 3 kids. So let's jump in and talk about it.
Absolutely. So Adam is the key moment in your life that started all this. ScreenStrong and your crusade to help other families. And so can you talk about that? How, that happened, how that unfolded?
Yeah, let's definitely dive into that a minute, because I feel like I can relate to so many people listening that may have a story just like mine and just don't have the words around it to figure out, like what happened. That was me. I, like you said in my bio, I'm a nurse. I went to school to study all sorts of things, and addiction was one of them, but I never knew that you could be addicted to a screen. It was like really new to me back then. And he started with a little Game Boy, if anybody remembers those days. And then he kind of graduated up to bigger games. And then in 9th grade, he got a laptop. They gave him a laptop at our school. And that was the beginning of kind of the downward spiral at that point, because, Andy, I was the game cop mom, right? The game cop parent, where you're constantly setting the kitchen timer and doing all that. But then when he got that laptop, I lost control of the amount of time that he was spending, because it was up with him everywhere, in his bedroom, down in the basement. Mom, I'm doing my homework, and I lost traction. I couldn't figure out how much time he was really spending on his game. It turned out that he was spending a lot of time on his game, but Adam had straight A's. So this is kind of an alert number 1. I think as parents, we feel like, I know me, and my husband for sure, we kind of gauge our parenting based off our kids' grades, right? So if they have straight A's, then they must be fine. And hey, we must be doing a pretty good job as a parent. Wrong. That was wrong. That was a big mistake that we made. He went into college after 4 years of high school, lots of conflict with us. Andy, you know what I'm talking about. You wrote a book about it. It's all that struggle in your family and the arguing, and, Adam, come upstairs for dinner. Adam, come upstairs for your sister's birthday. Hey, Adam, why don't you come open Christmas presents? All the conflicts we had. I was so happy for him to go to college, but he went to college. When all my other friends were sad, their kids were going to college, I was like, no, it's going to be great. Adam's going to find his life, and he's going to outgrow this crazy habit, this silly little boy habit that I thought it was, playing video games. But he went to school. We went to pick him up after his first year. I couldn't believe what I saw. He looked like he was clinically high or on drugs, or it was terrible. He wasn't bathed, he hadn't eaten, he hadn't left his room. His room was a wreck. We got in the car, we're driving home, and I asked him that really hard question that parents hate to ask their kids: Adam, are you on drugs? And he said, no, mom, no, that game did something to me. I've been in bed. I haven't been able to function. And by the way, I'm quitting school. And this was our straight A kid, with 7 AP classes going in. It's like, what? I mean, he was in this really wonderful engineering program. And I remember right where I was on the highway, where years of confusion all got really crystal clear. And it just hit me like, oh my gosh, all this time, this is what's been happening. This game that he really is addicted to looks like he's on some sort of chemical addiction. So that's when I met you, when I started traveling around, meeting people, reaching out, trying to find people that knew anything about video game addiction. I dove into the research, went to conferences, learned as much as I could. And remember, Andy, I think I read every book out there. I mean, I think I read 100 books. And I thought, okay, I know now what we did wrong. We started doing some presentations at our school because, we weren't the only one. Our school had kind of followed Adam, and they were like, what happened to him? And I'm like, look, I just found out what happened to him. So our school had me come do a presentation. We planned for about 20 people, and we actually had over 100 people stuffed in the little science room. And the counselor said, oh my gosh, so many people are struggling with this gaming thing. And then that's when you then came out that year. I think it was that year or maybe the next year. You came out. Remember, we did this whole big event. We had over 220 people or more come to this event. So that's when ScreenStrong got born. We started going out into schools, and I started making presentations where the average mom could understand the brain science, because it's really confusing if you don't go to nursing school. Average moms and dads are not having to be a neuroscientist like you are, Andy. So I had to simplify it. And in the meantime, our 3 younger kids got the benefit of all of our wisdom at that point. And I said, Melissa, sorry, sweetie, but you're not going to have a smartphone. That video game thing, we failed at that. So the smartphone thing and the social media thing, sorry, she had a flip phone. She was fine. She got a D1 scholarship in her gymnastics, 4-year scholarship at a huge school. She did fine. In fact, she did more than fine. Just imagine, she was never depressed because she got left out on social media because she just didn't have it. She never got rejected on Instagram because she never had it. She spent a lot more time with us, and we were different, that's for sure. The younger boys were coming up, and I said, guys, sorry. Your big brother, Adam, you know what happened? They watched it happen. And I said, until you do all these things, I made this long list, Andy, of like 20 life skills, things like making dinner and laundry and changing the tire. I said, until you learn to do all these things, y'all are not playing video games. And I remember my youngest one looked at me and he said, Mom, I'm going to be 18 before I learn how to do all those things. And I said, yes, sir, that's probably right. And so they made it all through high school. That's just the path we chose because of the pain that we experienced in our house. They made it all through high school without smartphones and video games, and they replaced all that with real life, in-person fun. They had their friends over all the time. And Andy, I like to tell people that we traded all of our counseling budget, because we had to add them even in counseling, through the hard times there with the gaming addiction. We traded all that money for food. We spent money on food because we had their friends over at our house all the time. So our food budget went up, but that's better than your counseling budget going up. And we had teenage boys in our house all the time. So much fun. Adam's childhood was void of stories and experiences and friendships. And then the boys had just the opposite. Their childhood has so much rich color to it, so many friends, so many funny stories. And most of all, they They just started college. They're fine. They're not addicted to video games. They really could care less about their phone. They ended up getting a phone that, I promise I will never buy a child a smartphone. That's my rule. So they bought some cheap little phones and they're fine. They're totally fine. They choose not to have social media right now. And all of the new friends they made at college, they're so jealous of Andrew and Evan because they're all stuck on social media. In fact, I got to tell you this funny little story with one of their roommates. They have separate, dorms, but one of their roommates came to me the last time I went up there to pick them up, and they said, "Mrs. Hempe," he comes running in. He goes, "Look, I took TikTok off my phone." Like it was just a big deal for him. They don't want this stuff. And so ScreenStrong basically is here not to make people feel bad or to criticize or to, heap guilt. That's not what we're here for. We're here to help you prevent screen addiction and also reverse it and also give you hope that wherever you are on your journey, I've been there, I've made all the mistakes. So I can help you kind of get out of it. And I can promise you, Andy, that this life of raising kids without toxic screens, not all screens, not all screens are bad, but just the toxic screens that we include video games and social media, which includes smartphones and pornography. Those are the three areas we work on. But it really works, and it's really okay to detour around the pothole and get to the other side and just be happy to look back and not have so much regret like we did, with our first experiment that didn't work so well. So that's kind of my little shtick there.
That's awesome. And for those people out there who are watching and they think that, Melanie is a unique situation, that her kids are just happens to be in that, problematic, group because, it's the Hempes, right? I wanted you to look at some resources. So Jonathan Haidt wrote a book called The Anxious Generation, and it's not just the Hempes. It's a lot of Americans and people around the world. Number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, you got to read Victoria Dunkley's book, Reset Your Child's Mind, where literally she's a pediatric psychiatrist and she sees mental health, mental issues, suicidal ideations, cutting, and all these terrible things that are related to expensive medical costs with psychology and counseling. They go away when there is a screen fast. Okay, when you take the toxic screens away, they all go away. You have to read Nicholas Kardaras' book. He's a PhD as well, and that's Glow Kids, and he has a second book too, and I'll put him on the screen for you. And then under my YouTube channel, there's a problematic technology use playlist with many interviews, including this one will be including that playlist. And there are experts around the world who are sharing the same thing that Melanie is sharing. So she was ahead of the game, and now she has solutions that work. And she has all this experience that, through the years of presenting, parents have gone to her and said, "Hey, listen, I've listened to you, and now my kids are an athlete. They're an artist. Right. They are an amazing writer. They are into drama or whatever." So the kid literally will find a gifting because they're not buried into these toxic screens. But however, parents will push back and say, "Hey, just a little bit of toxic screens are okay. A little bit of video games, a little bit of social media can't hurt them." So what do you say to that, Melanie?
Yeah, that's such a great question. That's probably the first question that we get when we do our presentations. And we actually have over 100 ambassadors right now. I think we have 120 right now that we send out all over the country to speak. So if you are listening and you want an ambassador to come to your school, we can send somebody, hopefully find somebody nearby. And that is probably, Andy, one of the number one questions we get. Isn't it okay in moderation, right? Can't we just do a little? And I will tell you that there are probably some kids that can do that. You'll know pretty soon if you have one of those kids, but I will also tell you that the persuasive design, and you're familiar, of course, Andy, with Richard Fried's new book, the persuasive design, as that gets more intense, the ability to moderate gets harder and harder. So as the persuasive design goes up, the ability to, just play in moderation goes down because it's really hard for a child to moderate because, we've seen it in our own home where, an hour on a video game, and then you go to unplug it or you go to tell them it's time to get off and you have a full grown, middle school kid having a meltdown on your kitchen floor, right? Like that's not normal. That's not normal behavior. So moderation can trigger, it can be the very trigger that your kid experiences that kind of leaps them into a habit. So we see it with really young kids that parents try to moderate, for example, their iPad time. And what happens is that even after 30 minutes, and of course, we know screen time is very weird. It always feels like you're on a screen for 10 minutes and really it's an hour. So there's some weird disconnect there. Even us when we're on our phone, oh, I'm just going to check my phone for a minute. And it's, 30 minutes later, you're still on your phone. And so for a little kid, when they're on this sofa and you hand them the iPad, many times that can kind of be the gateway to, developing this habit that becomes an obsession. So at ScreenStrong, we just like to tell people, you know what, you might want to try no moderation. And even when you're doing a 30-day reset, for example, where you're taking screens out altogether, why do we want to bring it back in? Why do we want to tempt that? Why do we want to tease them? Well, what you might say, the next question is, well, aren't they going to have to learn how to moderate it when they're older? And I'm going to say, absolutely they will, but their brain will be more mature. Their brain will be more connected. That frontal cortex will have more connections and they will actually be able to, hopefully moderate it when they're older, but they'll be adults. And there's like everything, there's so many things in our culture that we just don't let kids do because of the high dopamine, result from it. I mean, you look at drinking and drugs and we don't let kids do that because they can't handle that. So anything that's the quick dopamine, the high dopamine, like iPad time, video games, social media, all of those things, the dopamine level is just too high for kids to moderate. And I feel like even with parents, when we try to moderate, we're taking sides almost with our kids. And the most beautiful thing that happened to me when I raised one kid, with gaming, trying to moderate everything, and the other kids without it, the best gift to our family was the lack of arguments about screen time. I can't even tell you, it's day and night. I mean, with Adam, what he remembers about his childhood is that we argued all the time. With the boys, what they remember is that they played outside all the time. And then we talked together as a family. So moderation is sort of a myth, in my opinion, with the work that I've done for the last, 10 years. And it's not that it's a bad thing if you let your kids have screen time. That's not what I'm saying. But you're going to have to manage that. And overnight, almost, it seems like they can be caught in an addiction and you didn't even realize what happened because it's moderation. I think one of the best ways to start an addiction is do the addictive thing a little bit every day, every single day. Right?
Absolutely. For people who don't know about Richard Fried, I interviewed him and he discussed persuasive design, and the video will be placed up on the screen for you to look at. And what's important here is that it's gotten really bad, right? Because the technology companies, gaming companies, and social media companies, they are producing a free product now. So for example, there are games like Fortnite that are completely free, but they are making like over 5 billion a year in revenue. The only way they can make 5 billion, including like Facebook, I looked at the revenue lately and I think it's over 100 billion in revenue in a year on a free product, that you don't pay any money for. So how do they make the money? They make the money by having your eyeballs on the screen, and they sell ads and they sell upgrades and gadgets and weapons and
they sell your data, right?
Yeah, and sell the data. But for the kids, though, it's like, in Fortnite, they're buying skins and they're buying emojis and they're buying dances and they're buying songs and whatever these little add-ons in the games. So they can't resist anymore, in my opinion, because like what Melanie said, their brains aren't fully developed. So you got to just stand firm, and really moderation is, I agree with Melanie. It's really a lie. And I think maybe 1 in 1,000 kids might be able to moderate.
Yeah. Don't you think? Because you know how powerful it is. So it's like putting a bowl of M&Ms on your on your kitchen table and then telling your kids not to eat it or eat one. How can they not? How can they not
I
do
guess
that?
that's the test, I guess. So if your kid has a very favorite food, whatever it is,
Mhm.
and you can put that food on the kitchen table and say, do not eat this, and wait a week. And if
Yeah.
they can wait a week and not eat any, then
Yeah.
maybe they can moderate. But I still say that, food is not as
No,
tempting as social media and gaming,
no.
because the design of these games and social media is so enticing. So
Yeah.
there's another YouTube channel called Kobe Pearson. He does like these social experiments where he basically sets up these kids and pretends to be a younger girl or younger boy,
Oh,
grabs
yeah.
them. And so basically he invites them to meet him at like a remote place, like a playground or a park. And a lot of these kids do. And so
Yeah.
the parents are there to catch them, right?
Yes.
So these kids just can't resist because their frontal lobe is not fully developed.
No, and Annie, I think it's very frustrating for parents, right? Because we think, well, I told them not ever to get in the white van when the man comes to the door, right? But they still get in the white van. It's like, but I
Yeah.
just told you not to do that.
Yeah.
And so we have to stop getting so upset with our kids. And we have to realize that they're kids. They're
Yeah.
kids. We have to stop trying to pretend that they're adults, and we have to stop trying to think that all these conversations are going to make a hill of beans of difference, because it's not. And they're all good kids. It's not like they're a bad kid. They're
Right.
just not adults. And I think we just need to all take a deep breath and chill and just let our kids be kids, and they can chill and they can have a childhood and they can go play in the backyard and have their friends over and they can be bored, and it's okay, and we'll all be fine. And as one of my younger boys always says, Mom, having a phone, it's just not, or not having a phone is just not that deep. It's just not that big a deal. And he has been the one to really help me understand this, because you know how it is with kids. You blink an eye, they're grown, they're 20 years old, and they're fine. They're going to be fine. And I feel like that all this screen time and all of the talk in our culture. And, I'm friends with John Hyde. I worked on that manuscript when he was with him. I was honored to be able to help with that a little bit. And I know all the things that are out there right now today, especially, there's just so much. The thing I want parents to take from all of it is we only have a very finite number of hours with our children. And do we really want to spend any percentage of that, trying to manage and argue about screen time that they really shouldn't be having anyway? So it's such a joy stealer. It steals your child's joy. It steals your joy as a family. Your spouse, you're arguing because you don't agree, and one thinks this and the other thinks that. We need to pause and just stop a minute and take a break. And that is why with ScreenStrong, our little logo is a pause button. We're going to hit the pause button and we're going to stop and we're going to enjoy our kids and we're going to enjoy life. And you know what, Andy? Legos and colors and playing outside on our bike. We don't need to set the kitchen timer for those things. We don't need to manage the things that are really good for our kids, right?
Absolutely.
Reading a
Absolutely.
book. Are we going to say, honey, you've been reading that book too long? Get off. No, right? We would
That's
never
right.
do that. So for mom and dad out there listening, that's your test. That's what you decide. You decide, hey, if we have to manage this, and if we have to read all these books and figure out how to set all the parental controls and spend all of our time doing this, is it really worth it? I'm here to tell you it is not worth it. It is not worth it. But the path is narrow, Andy. I will tell you, the path is pretty narrow. The families and the kids that can really make it to the other side without some sort of, scarring from all of the gaming and all of the social media and all of the wasted time. And, Adam has a lot of scars from it. And we can't go back and fix it. So with medicine, what do? We look at the risk, we look at the benefits, right? Before you do any kind of surgery, before you do anything, you have to look at the risk and benefits. And I'm telling you right now that the way toxic screens with video games and smartphones and social media is right now, the benefits do not outweigh the risk. the risk are way too high.
And I agree. And we should look at what the wealthy and also the tech
Yes.
executives do. You know, they
Yeah.
send the kids to Waldorf schools. There was a 2011 New York Times article on this. And, you know, it's very clear. They wait until 16 before they even introduce like search engines and tech or tablets. 16.
Yeah.
So they spend like the first 16 years of their lives basically learning all these like, you know, brain essential higher executive function activities and behaviors. And then they get the screens later, but very much controlled as well. And they are fine. They do great. And
they're fine.
And you're right.
Yeah.
The path is very narrow because I've had, you know, like I've done a lot of talks and I am surprised that I have physician friends who would come to me later and say, I need help. Our kids are completely addicted to social media or gaming. You know, it's just so hard because they did the whole thing. They try to moderate it. They let them have a little bit of screens, and then one thing led to the other, and it's a full-blown addiction. They don't know how to manage it, and next thing you know it, they're 18 and they're failing out of life.
Yeah, and you know, the thing about it is, people think it's so hard to be screen strong. And to just say, hey, we're going to hit the pause button and we're going to not do these. We're going to detour around this. And when you're 18, you can get a smartphone and play all the video games you want because you know it's all going to be there and it's fine, right? And they think it's going to be that's so hard to do. But Andy, what is hard is trying to live with screens when you have kids and live with these types of screens and manage it and moderate it, just like what you were saying. That is what's hard. Let me tell you, I've done it both ways. It was very difficult with Adam. Being a parent with the younger kids was the easiest thing we've ever done. It was so easy because we're not arguing about all of this. You know, we don't have to worry about all the social media, you know, parental controls and all the porn stuff that we're trying to keep out off the phone and constantly be worried about how much time they're spending on a video game. Just imagine just for a second what your life would be like with your kids right now if you knew you were never going to have to argue about screens one more minute the whole time they were home. I mean, it's heaven. It is heaven. I hope I'm explaining it well enough because it is so different and it is so fun. And you get to the end of the time and they get out of high school and they go off. They are fine. They do not binge and go crazy and lose their mind. That is not what happens. And we know statistically from all the work that Leonard Sachs has done in The Collapse of Parenting and all the wonderful books that he's done that says virtue begets virtue. Now, is it 100%? Of course not. We can't guarantee anything 100%, but I can guarantee you one thing, that my little gamer, Adam, grew up to be a big gamer. He kept doing what he did the whole time he grew up. And the fascinating thing with the younger kids is now that they're in college, they're out of my house, they can do whatever they want. But guess what? They're doing the same things they did. One of them is in the orchestra at his school. He plays the violin. The other one is way into his piano. He's got 3 albums on Spotify. They both do all these intramural sports. It's like, okay, kids keep doing what they've always done. So the binge and go crazy myth, you know what? That's a myth. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen that way. So I just want to give you the little clue. The little clue. So if you're a parent right now and you have a middle schooler and you think, oh no, if I take Fortnite away, then when he goes to college, he's going to binge and go crazy. I'm like, probably not. He's going to play soccer if you get him on a soccer team and he gets pretty good. Because you know what? He's going to start getting good at what he spends time on now. Right? So Evan got really good on the piano. You know, much to his dismay from the mean mom, that would be me, making him take piano lessons and not letting him quit. Now, you need to have them on your podcast to talk about what it's like now. And they can look back in that short time and say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad my mom didn't let me quit stuff. Because you know what? I let Adam quit everything because he wanted to play games. And I just thought that's what we were supposed to do. But now they invested all those hours. And they love to read. I mean, even just now, I was just talking to one of them because they're out waiting somewhere for the other one. And I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm just sitting here waiting for Evan, but I brought my book. So I'm reading. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so funny that, I'm not making him do this, but these are habits that we instilled in them to read books and play music and be friendly and invite people over and plan events, and they're doing all the same things now. So I just want to encourage you, if you're just at the end of your rope and you're listening and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm pulling my hair out. Listen, I've been there. I know exactly what that feels like. You don't have to stay there, no matter what age your kids are. You can help them. And let's talk about that a minute. Let's talk about how to do that, Andy, because I know that you know how to do it. You know, medically, you know, all things that have to, you know, you have to get rid of the drug, you have to do a detox, right?
That's right.
You can't detox if you're still allowing them an hour a fortnight, even on the weekends and stuff like that. So what we did is we actually have a course for parents on our website, ScreenStrong.org. You can go on there and you get the course for parents. There's a digital course for parents. But then through the years, the most requested thing that we have had through all of my work has been, Melanie, can you write something for my kid? I need to explain this science and what brain development is, and you know why their brain's not developed yet, and all the science around screens and what screens do to your limbic area of your brain, and what video games do and what social media. You know, I need a way to explain this to them. So I wrote the Kids Brains and Screens. Kids Brain Screens is the name of all of our presentations. So it's Kids Brains and Screens, and it is a little workbook. It's a curriculum actually for your school. And it is full of fabulous illustrations. And we have 8 chapters, and we go through all of the brain science, all of the stuff. Look, this is one of my favorite pages, Annie. Let me show you this one. This is a page about dopamine. Like, wouldn't you love to explain to your 10-year-old about what dopamine is? And so you can look at this chart. We even have a poster where you can put this on your refrigerator and say, what are the things we're doing today that are healthy dopamine? And what are the things maybe that aren't healthy? So we have this curriculum. It has lesson plans. It has worksheets, it has quizzes. It's a full curriculum. And then we also this year, because John Hyde actually asked me, hey, could we make a smaller version? So we did. And this is the small version. And this is the home edition. And it has all the same lessons. We go through all the same stuff, but it doesn't have all the curriculum stuff in it. And this is for parents. This is really good for like a book club if you want to get together in your neighborhood, or your school or your church, whatever your small group is. And now you have a little book to read and you go through it all. And you know what I always tell people, because people say, well, this is kind of written for middle schoolers. I'm like, yeah, it is. And I always say, if you're a mom or dad and you want to learn a lot about history, read a 5th grade history book because you'll learn a lot. And so it's really simple. And it's always good to learn things in a simple way first before you get more complex with it. Just this summer, we'll be releasing the elementary version, which is for grades 2, 3, and 4. I'm like so excited about that. I'm coming out of my skin. I actually read it again yesterday because we're doing all these edits on it. And one of the pages really made me cry. I mean, honestly, I'm like, oh my gosh, this was so great. Because I just used the inspiration of my younger boys to write that book about what their childhood was like growing up without all the arguments and all the pain and suffering of having screens steal our childhood. So, Kids, Brains, and Screens.
That's awesome. You
gotta
did
get
so
it.
much work in that. Yeah, I'm so impressed that you been
Yeah.
able to get all that into a language, or a 5th grade level that
Yes,
people can
yes.
understand. That's so
So
important.
it's for 5, 6, 7th grade, and teachers are loving it because now we have, like you said, the language. We can talk to them. Plus, the other thing about this is that it is very fun. It's positive. At the end of it, we have an escape from screen jail. It's a whole exercise. It's like an escape room exercise. We have for the class to take a 7-day challenge to get off your video games and your phones for 7 days as a class, and then have a Friday fun night on the Friday night at the end of the week that you do that. So we have the whole thing, and it's so fun. And you know what I have realized is that I'll just tell you a big secret. Kids don't want to be on their screens. They want to hang out with each other. And they wish everybody in the world would get rid of their screens. They really do, because they want that human interaction. But because all their friends have it, they feel like they have to have it. But every teenager in the world, I think, would tell you we hate social media, but we have to have it because all our friends have it. So you have to start creating your own community. You have to start with education first, and then you start with your community involvement and getting other people involved. And what we did with the younger boys when they were in 3rd grade did a book club. We did your book. We did Richard Fried's book at the time. We did Dr. Dunkley's book. And we did this all through the school year. And those families that were part of that book club are to this day still the families that my boys are friends with. We created our little community. We learned that we don't need 100 friends. The Dunbar number statistic says we need 5. And that's about how many friends our brains can handle. So my boys actually have a lot more than 5 friends. But that's growing up, I realized that we just needed some really good close friends to do this with them. And it worked beautifully. And it works for so many families. So many families contact us and just say, oh my gosh, my life is so much easier. And, to the point that tech is here to stay. Of course it is. It's going nowhere, right? It's going to be even more and more and more. But that's the point. It is here to stay. They will have plenty of exposure when their brain is more mature and when they have the benefit of a strong, connected childhood. Richard Fried talks a lot in his book, and so does Leonard Sachs, about family attachment, right? And how important family attachment is. And I feel like if I had to diagnose the problem in the world, that's the problem. It's an attachment problem. Everyone is detached from the people that they love. And we are starting at a very young age, because let me tell you, when you're in the kitchen at night making dinner and your son is sitting somewhere in his bedroom on Fortnite, you are not attaching. He should be down there with you, talking about his day, talking about, Mom, how did you make that salad? How did you make that bread? And this is Grandma's recipe. And, you taught me a lot about that, about how criminals and terrorists, the first thing you do is you detach them from their family, and then you can get them to do anything, right? Because they lose their village. And I think that this is the biggest mistake that we are making as parents, that we are allowing our kids to be detached from our family way, way, way too young. And even your teenagers, they need you desperately. They need time with you. They need conversation with you. They don't need you to be on your phone, on your social media when they're home. You need to carve that out. And like when people come through our program and we can help you, we've got a non-social media forum for families on our Connect group on our website. You can get in there and talk to a bunch of families, and you can get help from other families and other ScreenStrong ambassadors to help you go through it. But one of the first things that we hear from families when they do their detox, we have a 30-day detox that we walk through with them. The first thing they say is, I had no idea my kids could talk so much. Because they end up talking to their kids more just in the nook and crannies of the day, just without screens. What are you going to do? You're going to talk. You're going to go read your book for a while, maybe, but you're going to talk to your mom. And that's what you really need to be doing. You need to have long dinner time conversations. You don't need any screens at the dinner table, of course, to distract all that. And you need to be very engaged in conversations with your kids. Otherwise, what's going to happen? They're going to get all their direction and all of their influence from all the influencers out there on social media and from their gaming world. And you're going to have less and less and less influence. And that is what I believe is the core foundational problem.
Absolutely. And so for the parents who feel overwhelmed now, right? Maybe their child is already obsessed with gaming or glued to their social media accounts. Is it too late to turn around?
No.
And how do they start?
Yeah, it's never too late. It can be very overwhelming. I'll have to give you that. Especially depends on how long they've been on. So if you've had a kid that's been pretty glued to his virtual world for 5 years, that's kind of a long time. So I'm not going to lie, it's going to take more than 5 minutes to get him off, right? We all want that quick, easy thing, but what you've got to do is have a plan. And I recommend, especially through the summer months, it is so easy and so much more fun to start like with a little family weekend away. And then you tell your kids, hey, when we come back, we are taking a screen fast. We're going to do a 30-day detox. We're not going to play video games, but mom and dad are going to help you with all these other things. And we're going to get your bike fixed and we're going to go swimming at the pool and we're going to do different things. You've got to replace it. The first thing we tell parents, though, is you have to change your attitude and you have to become the coach. So I want everybody to think about this a minute. I want everybody to think about when you were in school, in middle school or high school, you think about if you ever had a coach, who was your favorite coach? It wasn't the one that let you get away with everything and just didn't care. It was the one who was really firm and who was, very warm and caring, but they also held you to a really high standard, right? You love that coach because he's the one that believed in you and he's the one or she's the one that got you to stick to your sport when you wanted to quit because they were tough. They were tough on you. So I want you to think of yourself as a coach and your team is losing. So what are we going to do? Are we going to sit down and ask our team what they want to do? Heck no. We're going to come up with a plan. We're going to have a game plan. We're going to work on our core exercises. We're going to do sit-ups and laps, and we're going to do all things to make us strong again. And you're going to have to lead your family through this because your kids won't want to do it, right? Because they've been getting all this screen candy and all this drug. And so you've got to say, no. We have a new game plan. This is what we're going to do. And that's the little bit of hard work that you have to do. That part can be hard, but I'm promising you it's not going to take more than a couple weeks. But if you can make it through the couple weeks, it depends on how addicted your kids are. The younger they are, the easier it is, of course. But you got to get your plan in place. And then you replace their screen time with other hobbies. And this is very important because with Adam, we didn't develop or help him develop other hobbies. And that was on us. We didn't do it. With the younger kids, I spent a lot of time thinking through things that they could do in hobbies. And then by the time they got to 5th and 6th grade, they could take over that, right? But initially, parents have to structure that. Your kids aren't just going to wake up one day and say, oh, mom, I want to be a famous soccer player. That's not what's going to happen. You're going to have to structure that. The next thing that you do is that you start focusing on life skills. And we have everything we need in our home. We don't need counselors. We don't need to spend money on taking them to treatment and all this. We've got everything we need. So we had always a lot of weeds in our backyard that needed pulling. And we always had dirt in our house. And we always had a lot of jobs like that our kids could do. So we got them centered and focused on purposeful work, things that make them feel good. Hey, mom, come look out in the backyard. Look what I did. I cleaned up this whole bed, right? That's purposeful work. When your kid is on a video game, they can't show their mom what they did. Like Adam always said, in Minecraft, you can't build something to put on the dining room table. Like you can't show anybody. So it's a kind of weird feeling for them. But when children learn to work, it is a fascinating gift that you can give them. Plus, it makes them feel so good and they feel confident. So you want to be the coach. You want to replace the screen time with hobbies. You want to build those life skills. And you want to just be okay with being different. This is where we build leaders. And I saw this so clearly with my younger kids. They are the leaders in their peer groups now. They are the leaders at college. One was the student body president. The other twin was the senior class president. This is not by a fluke. This wasn't just a random lottery. This was because we worked really hard to build their character, to build their life skills, to build their grit. And you do that best offline. We enjoyed plenty of family movies. We watched family baseball games. I mean, we did screens in the right way, after I made all the mistakes. So I hope that everyone listening doesn't have to continue to make all the mistakes that I made. And I hope this is like a little bit inspiring to realize that you have everything that you need. You have the unconditional love that they need. You have time, right? You have to make time to spend time with your kids. I was working recently with a family that had a 16-year-old son who so many problems, right? With video games and all the things. And I told that dad, I said, all your son wants is time with you. And if you can get rid of the game, and replace that with time, that's going to save your son. You have to invest in him. And I know it sounds cliche and it sounds kind of trite, but it is true. a 16-year-old boy needs to be spending time with his dad way more than he needs to be playing Call of Duty or World of Warcraft or whatever it is. But it's hard. Not gonna lie, it can be hard. You got to maybe, Dad, maybe you got to think of a hobby. You got to start fishing, or running or going to the gym with him. Think of something to pour in. It's never too late. But the earlier you start, the better, for sure. The earlier, the better. But it's an investment, and you're going to get out of it what you put into it. Andy, I don't understand why everybody thinks 16 is okay to even give social media, because, and I have interviewed on my podcast families that the 16-year-olds seem to struggle the most with so much stuff, like the sextortion and all that. It's almost like they're just old enough to get certain things, but they're not quite old enough to not fall into the trap, right? It's almost like a fifth grader, with a phone. They will come show you, Mom, look, but a 16-year-old won't. So it's like we need to think about this really hard with the ages. I know a lot of people say 16 is fine or eighth grade is fine. I don't agree with that at all. I think we need to give our kids the richest childhood that we can with the resources that we have.
Yeah, we pretty much locked our kids out of social media until they were 18.
Yeah.
And, ready to go to college. And at that point, I think Emily, our kid, our youngest, needed access because that's what was for schooling. Right. But she had very limited access when she was 17, but she was the type of kid that had self-control. So she's probably 1 out of 1,000.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. I was my wife and I were in this documentary called Sextortion. It's on Amazon, and it's about actually a Top Gun pilot in the U.S. Navy who sextorted over 200 girls around the world. Nice. And he's in prison now. So he's a child sexual predator. But you're absolutely right. At 16, they are developing these, maturing thoughts. They are actually going through, puberty and adolescence and actually gone past that. And so they're at a very vulnerable state because their brain doesn't fully develop until age 25.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're embarrassed, right? And they don't want to tell their parents, where younger kids are like, hey, Mom, look what but that's the part that is so scary to me is they're just smart enough to realize, oh my goodness, there's something really bad wrong with this, right? Yep. But they don't have, like you said, they don't have the maturity, right? So they're very intelligent, but they're not mature. Yeah. This is something that parents need to understand, like the mistake we made with Adam. He was very intelligent, but that has nothing to do with maturity. And the sextortion cases are just horrific. Those cases are they just rip my heart out. Because it's unnecessary.
And we should throw some statistics out. The FBI estimates at any one time on a daily basis, probably 500,000 to 1 million or more child predators online looking for things. The problem is when you look at the addiction, and the reason why, Melanie was talking about moderation doesn't work, is that the way the brain chemistry works is that there's tolerance and it turns down the response. And so the same dopamine levels don't work anymore. So you have to get more super exciting stuff, and you have to get more super arousing stuff in order to basically feel that buzz or the high. And so these these pedophiles, they can't just look at 1 or 2 images. Right. Okay. They seek out every single variation. That's why, these addicts, have to escalate, and they'll have 30 to 40,000 images. And so that's why your child is a low-hanging fruit for pedophiles.
High risk. Yeah.
High risk. And so in this case of the Top Gun pilot, he actually posed himself as a 16-year-old, very attractive lifeguard boy. And so that's how he got these girls to chat back. And literally, you look at these cases, and it only took 1 or 2 weeks before they were able to be caught in this dilemma of sextortion.
Yeah. And sometimes it only takes 4 hours.
Yes. Right.
That can happen. You can have a perfectly healthy kid who's just, happy-go-lucky. Yeah, his social media is fine. He's not really, and literally within a one evening sextorted activity, he could kill himself. Like this is what I want parents to understand. Not that we're fear mongering. It is just the fact. This is the statistic. And when you mix this teenage brain of a 16-year-old boy who, like you said, is reaching his peak sexually and he's all interested in all these things, but yet he doesn't have the frontal cortex in place to what we call play the tape forward, right? He can't think ahead. He can't think ahead that, okay, even if this person is threatening to put, these images out of me that I just did, and he just took whatever, and he's going to embarrass me, it's not the end of the world. But in his brain, it is the end of the world. And then he will end his life because of it. And that can literally all happen in a 4-hour period. And that is what is so risky about all of this for our kids. Why would we do this? Why would we expose them to all this? And why did we do this with Adam? How could I have not have seen that 5 hours on a video game in the evening was not a great thing? How did I not put that 2 and 2 together? And of course, I can't beat myself up, and Adam, by the way, everybody always wants to know what happened to Adam. So I will just tell you that after he came home from college, he was on my couch. This was not a good look, okay? Once you launch your kids, they need to launch, right? And so I called the military, and I actually had a recruiter come to the house and recruit Adam to go into the Army. So he spent 5 years in the military, and we're very proud of him. And there he found his purpose, and he found that discipline that he needed and the structure, plus lots of exercise, which is huge. Plus he got a lot of sleep, which he wasn't getting. And then he did come back and finish school. So, but I will tell you that none of that was worth the price that he or we had to pay for it. So anyway,
that's awesome.
He's doing fine, but you know what I mean? It's not without scars.
Absolutely. And, Melanie, one of your core values is telling parents and families dare to be different. So how does that look like when all their friends are using smartphones and gaming?
Yeah, what a great question. This is great. So you start early, if you can, to talk about it's okay to be different. And I will tell you one little thing that happened. Do you remember back in the day when middle school kids, third graders, they loved those there was a certain kind of socks. It was a sport socks, and they were like $15, and I can't remember the name of it, Nike or something, I can't remember. But my kids, and we just didn't have those. I didn't think that third graders needed socks that cost $15 in our house. That was kind of a value that we had. I don't know. It was crazy. I know. So anyway, they got in the car one day. I'm picking them up from school, and Andrew gets in, Evan gets in. Evan says, "Mom, so-and-so has the, elite socks." And Andrew turned to him and said, "Evan, don't you know that we're not a cool family?" We don't get those socks. I just cracked up laughing because I think we are a very cool family. But you have to instill this idea that you're different to your kids, to say, look, this is our little team. This is what we're doing. And not everybody's going to agree, but that's okay, because we're still going to have a lot of fun, and you're going to invite them over. And so very quickly, they got used to just being a little bit different, right? And honestly, what they would tell you, and you seriously should get them to come talk to you, what they would tell you is by the time you get to like 9th grade, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Middle school is the hardest. So if you can get over that little hump of middle school, because they'll say by 9th grade, people could care less whether you have a phone or not. Like, that's just not even a thing. Like, that it is a big deal in middle school, right? That's when parents all cave. They all cave and give in. And so if you can make it through middle school, I call middle school mile 19 of your marathon. You hit the wall, you're going to crash, but you got to get over it. You got to have a plan to get through middle school. And then once you get over that hump and you're in high school, you know what? It's just not that hard. It is not that hard. And I love teaching my kids how to be different, because they're going to have to learn how to be different the rest of their life in many areas, right? We don't want them to go with culture. Nobody does. There's a lot of things in culture that really aren't good. So we have to start teaching them early. Let's not conform to all this, what culture says. We'll take the good and we're going to leave the bad, and we're going to teach you how to tell the difference. So I will tell you that my kids have a lot of friends. Even now they come home from college, we got like 7 extra people eating dinner with us on the weekends. They just played in one of their best friends' weddings, believe it or not. They knew so many people there. It is a myth to think your kids won't have any friends. Your kids will have more friends when they don't have social media and phones. And I know that just sounds so crazy, but they will have more friends because they will have to deliberately go and spend energy and time making those friends. Why did Evan become the student body president? Because he knew the names of the people in his school. When you're on social media, you don't know the face-to-face people. You might have a lot of people on social media, but you would never recognize them even in the hall, probably, right? So he had relationships, and their life is very full. It is a myth to say that your kids won't have any friends. You know what? And just because your friends are jumping off the bridge doesn't mean you jump off the bridge, right? That's the other thing we have to remind our kids. They have a lot of friends. We hear this all the time with ScreenStrong kids. It's like this little secret that until you do it, you don't really get it. But once you do it, it's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. This is like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Like, we have so many friends, we have so many interests. They learned how to do, like I said, their violin and their piano, and they did art, and they rode their bike to get their haircuts, little downtown where we live. And all the people know them from the little stores down there. And they have so many friends. So this idea that they get left out, I mean, I think girls that are on social media are probably the most lonely people on the planet. I think they must just be so lonely because they're not in person enough, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
Andy, if you are a fifth grade boy, and your dog dies, you don't want to just talk to somebody on social media. You want your friend to come over and like sit with you. Like, it's sad. Like, we want that empathy to be built. And we're not ever going to do that on a phone. And it's not that phones are evil. They're not all evil. None of this stuff is all evil. It's just the wrong tool at the wrong time, because it's a tool, but our kids aren't using it as a tool. They're using it as a toy, and it's a weapon of mass destruction. It's not helping them grow up, and they'll have the rest of their life to be on it. So
Absolutely. And I agree with you. And I just want to circle back on what you said about how the kids won't binge game and binge use after, being tech free during high school. So Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called The Outliers, and he discovered that about 10,000 hours is what's needed to develop a mastery skill set. And so what you did was basically Evan and Andrew and your daughter developed Melissa, developed mastery in several different skill sets. So what happens is, these games are pretty hard, right? So like, for example, Fortnite, to get the same level of dopamine from Fortnite as a 19-year-old college student who's never played Fortnite before, they're going to suck. It's going to be terrible. It's just frustrating, right?
Yeah.
It's not fun.
No.
And so they would rather go back to their piano playing and their soccer or their art or gymnastics or whatever it is that they have developed mastery in. That is why you don't have to worry about them just going off and just gaming excessively in college.
Right.
Now, if you try to moderate, and I've seen this many times, I've had even family members and even close people in my life who didn't listen to Julie and me, and basically try to moderate their kids' gaming because they were straight A students. Guess what happened when they went to college? They flunked out. And I can just name so many, dozens and dozens and dozens of these examples where kids flunked out. That's why we knew it was a problem. And what's interesting about this is that people are going to see lawsuits happening, and they're big lawsuits now. You can look it up. And so, so basically, lawyers are going after, actually families are going after gaming and social media companies today. And I anticipate that you will see a fight like the big tobacco fight.
Oh yeah.
Where they basically created an addictive product and marketed to kids, especially with like Camel the cigarettes, for example. And you're going to see a similar battle with the tech companies and those who design gaming and social media and have taken advantage of our children and have caused problems and heartache and all these things that Melanie's describing. And it's going to be a big battle. It's going to happen. Yeah.
Well, and I just want to say, because a lot of people ask me in the early days, they probably asked you the same thing. Don't you want to just shut down all these big gaming companies and the big tech companies? And I'm like, no, I really don't. My kids just don't have to do it. Just like smoking, I don't need to go shut down the big tobacco companies. I just don't need to allow my kids to smoke, right?
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
parents, we can't be victims, right? We're not victims. We know how powerful it is now. And some of us, like our family, we learn the hard way. And hopefully ScreenStrong exists to help those of you out there that are younger that can come into this space now and not have to learn the hard way. You have the statistics, and not only that, you have the science. Of course, our recommendations have never changed. The truth really doesn't change, right? So everything that we've always recommended over the years, we still recommend the same thing, just to hit the pause button, delay it. I hate to say delay because you don't want to just delay pornography. That doesn't even make sense. We don't want to do that. But that's why we don't use that word. But we want to kind of detour around it, especially during these young developmental years. And we want to give our kids like the best experience, right? We want them to hit home runs. We're not going to like make them hit a home run, but if I'm a coach and I'm a baseball coach and I never teach my team about what a home run is, they will never hit a home run. I can promise you that. And we know they're not going to hit a home run every time they get to bat, but shouldn't we raise the bar? Shouldn't the bar be that high? Shouldn't we want that for our kids to do real life really well? Because we know if they do real life really well, they will be fine in the virtual world when they have to be there for a job or whatever it is they need. I'm really curious if my younger boys will ever get social media. That's how much they don't care about it. And maybe they will one day for a job. But there's a huge movement now that a lot of people are pulling away from social media because we realize what it's done to us even as adults. It'll be interesting to see. You'll have to have me back on. I'll tell you.
Well, Melanie, thank you so much for your wisdom and your enthusiasm and energy. It's been a pleasure to have you. And I'll put the link here to your website, screenstrong.org.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
Thank you so much again, Melanie. This is awesome. And if you have liked this video, please like, share, and comment. And also hit the subscribe button here so that you get notifications for our future podcasts and videos. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.